coming to the behavioral model work group meeting October 27th. And I wanted to, number one, make sure you guys can see my screen. Yeah? Yes? Okay. And I wanted to bring up what we covered last time, the week before OCP, and I pretty much put in red here the most important things because we went through a lot of items last time. And so last time we talked about Marian or NVIDIA decided to, it was making changes to the SCI APIs, and those took priority over changes to BMV2. And then he was going to go back and do P4C changes. So we had that going on. And we talked a lot about this pull request here. And then at the end of the day, Chris was going to do an experiment here and leave a comment on a PR. And then at the very end, Vincent was going to see if we needed to open an issue for prefixes in the ACL. So I guess let me check and see if Marian's on the call. He is not. Okay. So maybe we could start with Chris then here. Did you have a chance to do the experiment?
Yes, and in fact, I made a kind of a test branch and
Okay.
shared it with Marian. And for those who are interested in P4 annotations, I just pasted a link so you can look at this Scratch branch where I just showed some example structured annotations. And it's just an alternative way so that the metadata is right in the P4 source code explicitly. Christina, do you want to click on that link just so people don't have to?
Yeah,
Uh,
sure. And I'm going to share a different window real quick
yeah.
here. I'm going to stop sharing that window and click the link and share my screen. Okay, I'm back.
Yeah. So if you just look at that highlighted line at the top, I don't know if you can magnify a little bit.
Sure, I can.
Thank you. So just to remind people what the discussion was about, I raised a concern in a PR where we're extracting P4 table names and SCI table names using some kind of heuristic in the code generator, saying, okay, if the annotation or the P4 table name is such and such, we will construct the table name and the API names from that And I was concerned that there's like hidden magic in a code generator that you don't see in the P4 source code. And I generally don't like that kind of buried magic. So I suggested just bringing it right out as an annotation in the code. And I explained that there's different ways of annotating, and then you can get that from the P4 info. So if you see on line 38, name VIP and then a bar symbol and then dash VIP, that was then processed in the code generator, or it's being processed today to extract the table name and the API name. But see how that's kind of hidden magic? It's not obvious from reading the code. And so I said, look, let's just make an annotation and call it right out. And then we could replace line 38 with 39 as a for instance. And so I just wanted to show that. And then I extracted the P4 info from that and showed it to Marian. So he's digesting this. So that was the concept. And if someone else has an alternative idea, we're all ears. But not everyone's familiar with a structured annotation format inside square brackets, where you can actually put in different kinds of expressions in there. And the P4 compiler will actually parse it for you and create small data structures like maps in the P4 info. So it actually does a lot of work for you. And that's a newer annotation scheme that maybe introduced a couple of years ago by me actually for this kind of purpose. And it's in the P4 language and the P4 compiler. So that's just probably too much detail, but go ahead, Mukesh. You got a question?
Yeah, I think for this particular PR that we talked about, the need was to have annotation on the parameters to, let's say, action functions.
Oh,
I think that
right. There's probably, yeah, you know what? You're right. There's another, yeah, there's multiple annotations in this file. I'm trying to remember. where it was. Thank you for reminding me. It's been a few weeks, hasn't it? Let's see, let me find it. I think if I search for the word psi, I'll find it. Give me a second. Oh, look at line 113 in that file. Thanks for reminding me. It's been a while. Okay, there you go. There's another annotation on an action parameter. And again, using the ad hoc psi annotation. You can put anything you want, and we just said, oh, let's just make it a Boolean. So you can see it's mandatory, and there's no magic. There's no heuristic in the code generator, which hides all that, decision making. It's right there in the code, and it's really obvious what it says.
Yep.
So we can extend this with any kind of key values, and the P4 compiler parses it for you. So if people like this
should
approach,
show up in the. So this would show up in the JSON file that the P4 compiler generates.
Yes, it's the P4C extracted. I compiled this. You can actually go to this branch and build it. Just you make P4, and you'll immediately see the output in 3 seconds. And encourage people exploring this technique. I think it's a little better than some of the other methods that have arbitrary parsing schemes and formats. And you can put different expressions in those square brackets. If you look at the P4 standard, it spells out several examples.
If somebody wouldn't mind publishing in I don't know, sample output highlighting the lines of extra lines produced by the P4 compiler for such an annotation on an action parameter or a table, that might.
I think that might be in the P4 runtime spec. Those examples.
Okay. Even a link to those might be useful for some people then.
Yeah, sure. I'll I don't want to make this whole. I don't want to take over the meeting with this one thing, but I'll try to find that.
Oh, later is fine. Just to.
Yeah. So we can adopt any kind of convention we want. Again, this is where you'd establish a convention by saying I hereby declare this psi annotation in use. Right. That's all you have to do is just start using it.
So the keyword after the at that can be any keyword or the compiler doesn't care, right? So what comes after that? The
compiler doesn't care. It can be anything, and it will parse it in the P4 info. Let's see. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, here we go. I'm going to share my screen just for a moment.
Yeah,
and
feel free.
you will, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. Okay, can everyone see it? So this is from the P4 runtime spec because it talks about P4 info, etc. And so if you had an annotation like this, let me get it a little bigger. So here's an annotation, mixed expression list. Here I've got a bunch of things, right? I've got a comma separated list with even some key values. And you'll see how the parser will, the P4 info will have this, and here's the name of it. And this can be expressed in JSON too. The output can be JSON or protobuf. This is a protobuf type output. Right? But you just see how it just tells you, here's a key value list, and it gives you these KV pairs, right? So it's pretty easy to parse. It's very explicit. You can put quite a few things in there. So take a look. It's also in the P4 standard in a little different format, more like, compiler notation, showing how syntax is expressed. And I'll paste this here in the chat so people can take a look. But to my knowledge, no one's using the structured format yet, even though it's been in the compiler a couple of years.
A couple of years. Okay.
It took a year to get this in the standard because we have some very picky, bright people in the language committee.
Conservative. It's a conservative group. I think it's a better
conservative. Yeah, no, discerning.
Discerning.
There you
is
go.
a good word.
Okay. Yes. But I think
this is great. Yeah, this is great, Chris. I think I also didn't like the way we kept some of this information in the code generation, or basically the script that generated the Psi APIs and so forth. And I think annotation is the right way to go to ensure that we don't have that magic or that extra knowledge that essentially can deviate us from, if you change something, other things basically get changed as well, right? So.
Right. Okay. So that closes that action item, at least in terms of sharing the idea. And as far as implementing, it's on, I guess, Marian's plate for now, but anyone who wants to take this parsing on and use it, you're welcome. And I think if we start adopting this approach, then we'll probably write a README document that says, here are the conventions we've adopted for this dash behavioral model P4 code, right? We'll want to spell it out, because otherwise we have another heuristic in the code, just examples rather than spec. So.
Yep. Now, it looks like we don't have Vincent on the call, but I don't know if Bud can speak to Vincent's item, but we can wait till next week if not. Bud, do you remember?
I remember what he was talking about. I don't have the
no big deal.
The issue in front of me. Let me take a couple of minutes in the background and I'll try to refresh my memory on it.
Okay, or we can wait for him next week too. It doesn't have to be this week. Okay, cool. And so I guess yesterday in the regular Dash community call, we had a huge long conversation about, let me see if I can distill it down to the very, like the shortest version, but we were having a conversation around Psi Challenger, and this is just for the people who weren't on the call yesterday. And basically, at the end of the day, we're missing some linkage between having a virtualized, I guess, the SyncD and the ReDis in Sonic to be able to run testing without actual hardware and do it in a virtualized fashion. Am I summarizing this correctly, Chris?
Yes.
And so, and just at the end of the day, I went ahead and created a work item inside of, I didn't know exactly where to put it, so I put it in the behavioral model GitHub project here, and I threw it in the bottom of the backlog where I said virtualized SyncD and Psi ReDis for dash BMV2. And the reason is to exercise dash virtually, threw it in there. But we talked a lot about this yesterday, probably for about an hour. And so, yeah, Chris, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Christine. I'll just sort of put in a slightly different context. The immediate issue was we want to contribute this Psi Challenger based framework for Dash. We enhanced it for Dash. And Gohan's reservation is, well, we don't have any, like, even POC to show that the Psi ReDis connection goes all the way down to the BMV2 model. And what's missing is a SyncD, daemon that compiles the BMV2 libpsi along with the SyncD source code in Sonic to prove this whole connection. And so it's a valid concern. And so even stepping back several months ago, I think I put out to the community, hey, do we need a SyncD? Are we going to have a whole virtualized dash Sonic stack BMV2? And it was a rhetorical question that never really got answered. And I think this topic now is putting it back on the table. It looks like without at least SyncD with BMV2, we don't have a simulation of the Redis connection going to a dash pipeline. So, the question is, do we need that? And, who would do the work? I'm actually in talks with Peel Vision in the background, trying to understand the scope of the problem. We're all wrestling with that right now.
Yeah. So I kind of just wanted to update everyone on this call, specifically Andy. I thought he might find this interesting, and that's why I brought it up. But yeah, so I added that here. Any comments on this, or anyone want to talk about this for a minute?
Thanks for catching me up. I don't have any comments.
Okay, all right. You see what we're trying to work through at least?
Oh, I mean, there's a ton of work here. I agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks. So, yeah. So those are all of the action items I had on the table for today. I don't have Marian here. So, is Shai here? Shai, do you have an update regarding Marian's action item from last time around making doing the P4C changes and making the SI API Sonic changes?
No, I don't have any updates from Marian. I can follow up with him and
Okay.
make you the update.
Okay, thanks. So open forum then, I guess. Anyone else have anything, or I can give time back today?
I just have a quick,
Go for it.
things. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Hanif.
This intersects with both HA and behavior model. We talked about in the HA call about this one, which is to say that today, the proposal that AMD Pensando had presented, it actually defines the SI API for HA manually, right? However, we did discuss in some of the meetings in HA that how could we, have some ways to either auto-generate, much like how we do it for other cases, within the create a P4 model and then auto-generate the APIs. However, there are challenges, as we all know, in HA, whether or not we can actually represent it in P4 and then be able to generate the APIs. But this work that at least we should investigate, right? And then I think we agreed to that in that one of the meetings that we should investigate where what is the right way to really define whether in have a P4 model or perhaps maybe some Visio or whatever the way it is done underlay SI to at least define some logical pipeline that essentially becomes the source of truth through which the APIs are generated, or APIs are basically can be referred to, right? So I think we should basically have some work item to investigate how we define the source of truth for the HSI APIs.
I remember this discussion, but try to clarify for me, are these APIs that actually describe or the pipeline behavior, or are they more administrative APIs like setting one IP address to do such and such feature? It's not really a pipeline operation as much as maybe an endpoint or device, configuration. Are there certain APIs that need a model versus just an API to configure the platform, so to speak?
I think we can define a model, or as I was mentioning, some representation, right? For example, today what happens is that any API, we have a lot of other APIs inside today, whether it's underlay or overlay side, which are which have some source of truth, and they also are like what you're describing, some administrative APIs in which we set certain values. But however, each and every of those things you can refer back to some logical pipeline which says that okay, you have defined certain object or certain instance in somewhere, and then you are doing this CRUD operation, right? And this CRUD, one of the CRUD operations, it can be referred back to that one. So although it's not so-called elaborate pipeline, so to speak, but at least some representation is there, which becomes that people can refer to.
I see.
So I hadn't really created a GitHub project for HA yet. I have one for all up dash work, and I have one for behavioral model, and I didn't have one for HA because I wasn't sure if we were there quite yet, because we need to do the definitions of the protocol we're going to use to sync, and like what we're going to sync and how often, and blah blah blah. So are you saying, honey, if we should have a project for HA similar to this and start defining work items, or
Yeah, that would not hurt. I think we should do that, or we can basically have it here and refer it. That okay, this is something, because like I was saying, it intersects both sides, right? So
it does.
yeah.
They're all kind of meshing together. Okay. All right. I will think on that for sure.
Thanks.
And someone else, was it Mikola had something to
Yeah,
say? Or,
so
go
Waldemar
ahead.
is speaking here. So I have
Okay,
just one
sorry.
thing about the, yeah. So on the Dash repo, I opened one issue related to the IPv6.
Okay.
So if anybody can take a look on this. So actually the issue is related to the underlay IPv6. So I found information that IPv6 for underlay should be supported, but looks like the BMV2 pipeline is not expecting to have the underlay v6, so something needs to be fixed, or BMV2 pipeline for the documentations. But because as I understand, so underlay IPv6 should be supported, right? Or they not expect.
I'm trying to think if it was just overlay or if we were including underlay. Oh, Marian's on the call. Do you recall?
Eventually, both will be supported. It's a question of the effort and when.
Okay, so in this case, looks like BMV2 pipeline just needs to be fixed. Like, for example, the VIP table, so it expects only IPv4. So looks like it needs to be just fixed.
So we need a volunteer to craft this. What priority would this be, guys? Probably not P0, but maybe P1.
Just depends how soon we think we need it.
Yeah. Who else should be? Oh, this should have been reviewer, not assignee. I'm sorry, Marian. I'll try and fix it. So, does anyone want to pick this one up, or if not, we can put it in the backlog. Okay. I'll throw it in the backlog.
Yeah, it seems like we need to try to fix what's currently in code but broken. In my humble opinion, that would be a priority because we can't even run like ACL rule tests. We can program ACLs to some extent, but there's still some open issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it. All right. And
There were a couple of PRs that were closed recently that might be worth mentioning before we lose them to history.
okay.
If you want to look at PRs and the closed, I think it would be worth people just making a comment. You can just click on that closed right down. Yeah, it's actually a link there I found finally. Let's see if I can find it. The 264, someone with the awesome handle of pterosaur from, I think
Who's
that's
that?
Dave from Microsoft, I believe. I don't know the person, but Z Gone.
Huh.
Here to
Yeah, he's in China.
Yeah. But he stepped in and fixed some things. And so he was able to re-enable a test case that had been commented out. And that test case simply programmed the ACL rule entry, which is a step forward. We still don't test them yet. And I'm not sure if they actually operate. I think there still might be some, issues, but we're getting close to be able to actually test ACL rules in the pipeline. And that's important. And then 263 Hanif updated, and we have a working V6 test case now where we set up ENIs and we use a V6 underlay, if I'm not mistaken, IPv6. And
no, it's a V6 overlay.
Oh, overlay, sorry. Overlay? Oh, yeah, overlay. Yeah, of course. Get my words mixed up. V6 overlay. It's kind of a collaboration. Several of us pitched in. We figured out the problem. It was really, the problem was just simply kind of a teardown instruction in the PTF test case. It was easy to fix once someone pointed it out.
Awesome.
So about the 264.
Yeah.
So I had pointed out that there's actually more issues in ACL. So I raised an issue month back or something. So if you go to the bottom, yeah, 232.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't remember ever talking about this in detail in the forum. So maybe we can bring this up.
I sort of remember this.
Yeah, so we can.
Yeah, I guess we mentioned it at the end of some meeting previously, but we never talked about it in detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need this before we can
believe-
actually use them, right?
Yeah, I think Mariam was going to take a look. I can go through my notes.
Yeah, actually, I did take a look at the changes for this one. Yeah, I can talk about it a bit, but yeah, changes are not very simple, so I wanted to talk about it.
Okay.
So basically what we need to, so the problem here is that in the pipeline, the macro table is split into the multiple stages, right? So each is a different table in the P4. It all becomes separate instances. Like each stage is a separate instance of the ACL table, whereas in the SI API itself, it's a single API that takes the stage as just a parameter, and then we'll have to populate the stage correct stage table in the pipeline. So the BMV2 implementation right now is broken because it doesn't do that. So basically, we have the one solution would be to just copy the whatever is programmed by the user in the SI API to all the stages. Just blindly copy it everywhere, just for the BMV2 implementation, so that we get it working.
Actually, this engineer from China is working on that together with me on implementation.
Okay. Okay. So, how is he going to solve this?
We don't know yet.
Okay, because I did start working on it. So, but then I hit another issue, so that's why I stopped.
Yeah, there should be a kind of multiplexing done to derive from attribute name, derive the right table to put all the entries in.
Okay. Okay. So maybe, yeah, I don't know.
Maybe maybe you're right.
The,
it will have to be replicated. This may be a case. Not sure. We'll see.
yeah, the replication. The problem that I ran into with replication was that because our ACL table is inside the different pipelines, right? So the action actually is different. It's not the same action ID. The P4 compiler, when it compiles the stages, say for example, the inbound and the outbound end up with two different action IDs. So it is not easy to replicate either. So we can replicate within the inbound. Let's say within inbound, we have 3 stages and outbound 3 stages. So there are a total of 6 ACL tables in the pipeline. We could replicate within the inbound or within the outbound, but we cannot replicate across both. So that's the issue I faced. I was able to get it replicated, but the problem was with this because of the action ID, it was failing. So that's where I stopped. So one option would be to combine the ACL lookup into the bring it into the common dash pipeline rather than keep it as a separate inbound or outbound. Yeah, but that needs some work, I guess. But if there's an alternate way of selectively provisioning it, then we can probably look into that. I don't know if this annotation that Chris was talking about, would that help here? It's another thing we could look at.
So I think that the Oh, shoot. No,
I mean, in general, having one P4 table when you want it to be common in the data plane and control plane is better than writing more than one.
So it's a single table, but it's actually invoked from multiple places in the pipeline. The apply is called from multiple places, so it ends up as multiple instances in the actual pipeline.
I'm just saying that that's going to cause friction and trouble, right? You could recirculate and do the same table again, maybe, but
I think recirculate will bring more problems than applying.
BMV2 has long since its inception had a restriction that a table can be applied at most once per control. You're up to generalizing that or using a different software switch.
It's not the restriction, it's just the responsibility of programming all the instances lays on the control plane.
No, I'm telling you, BMV2, the compiler, the P4 compiler for BMV2 doesn't let you apply the same table multiple times in a control. It'll give you a compiler.
No, I think we have used some macros or something to kind of change the name of the table when it's invoked.
That's
So
two
it's
different
not,
tables. That's two different tables in the according to P4
exactly,
not one.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what.
If you want to create multiple tables and
actually
add the control plane replicate entries in each one, yes, you can do that. Yeah, I mean the next best thing
each of these have the same set of. Each of these have the same set of parameters and actions, and everything is identical. So I think we modeled it as one SI API, or the control plane API is the same. And there are like multiple, so there's a stage attribute that goes into the control plane API, which differentiates which actual table instance in P4 the row should go into.
Is your goal that each of these differently named P4 tables with common key and common actions should always have the same key action parameter sets at all times? Identical entries? Then I'd say write some control plane code that duplicates every cycle into multiple P4 table writes, if so.
Yep, that's what we're talking about. But with that, the issue is that the tables are getting invoked in different input. The pipeline itself is different, so the action IDs are that is getting generated are different between the two.
You can put annotations to force them to be the same, I think, maybe. I don't know. You could try. Or put other annotations that are not the ID. You don't have to use the action ID annotation, right? You can make up your own if it helps.
Yeah, I need to look into these annotations if we can use that to.
I mean, instead of using the built-in P4 info ID attribute, which must be unique across all different tables and actions, you're going to be climbing uphill in the P4 runtime spec to try to make those identical, and it probably won't work. They need to be unique if they're different named P4 tables, but you can create a new SI ID attribute that could be identical across multiple tables if you want, no trouble.
Yeah, but how do we push that to P4 itself?
No, you don't have to. You make up your own annotation, like Chris showed earlier.
Yeah, let me pull that up here.
Don't use the ID annotation built into the standard, because that one you'll be pushing uphill. But if you make up your own, you can have whatever value you want and assign whatever semantics you want to it.
Yeah. So Marian, is the other engineer going to look at this?
Yeah, I will have a call with him today evening. I think he is planning to have this part of implementation. I'm not sure. For now, we just discussed similar problems. So,
Chris, do you want to cover, since Marian joined, do you want to cover the annotation that you covered early on, or quick?
Well, I'll just recap? Marian and I actually had quite a bit of dialogue, weeks ago when I created this. So he's got everything he needs. Maybe he could give us his take on things. So Marian, I just apprised people, did a little tutorial on these structured annotations and
Yeah,
shared the
right
brand.
here.
So did you find that useful? Are you guys going to use that?
Well, yeah, definitely. Structured annotations is something that we'll need to move to eventually. It's much more straightforward. It will reduce the auto generation to pretty much nothing.
Yay!
Everything will be in P4 code.
That's great. I think what we want to do as we start adding them in is just open up make a README document that just at least lists the conventions we're using. So people don't have to learn it from reading code. It's just spelled out. So there's like a guide, style guide or something for this project. I think that would be useful.
Cool. So I guess the last thing what we started the meeting with was we were covering what we talked about prior to going to OCP. And so we talked about this, Marian, about making the SCI API changes and going back to P4C. If you wanted to tell us what's going on with that, and then we could probably end the call.
Yeah, I'm still working on SCI. There are issues with the APIs that we found because we're working with Microsoft on the org agent integration, so it would work with at least virtual switch. But we found still some issues in the SCI APIs. They are minor. IP range list is of the wrong type, should be prefixes. So I'm fixing that. And then there is a draft PR for starting the integration of the what it's called, the connection tracking support in the compiler. However, it needs to be fixed a little bit. I saw Chris's comments. I just didn't get to them. So the idea is that I will integrate the compiler first, so we can compile P4 code with connection tracking. Next would be there is also BMV2 support for that. The only thing that's missing is actually what we were talking about right now. What we experimented with is that connection tracking is applied twice in the pipeline, on the inbound and on the outbound, which results in two tables that needs to be kept in sync as well. So after I'll have that, the BMV2 changes will also be supported, and it will enable us stateful traffic on BMV2.
You're going to somehow hack up BMV2 that two differently named P4 tables share common auto add entries?
No, well, actually, it's yeah, it's kind of the same table. It's applied in different controls, which results in different names.
Right. But by default,
yeah.
in BMV2, that's two separate sets of entries, and if you audit in one, it won't affect the other.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll need to make them learn together. Whenever one learns, another one will learn too.
Okay, as long as you're aware of that.
Well, thanks, Marian. And Bud, did you say you'd just comment on Vincent's? And again, we don't have to cover it if you don't know.
Yeah, so I think I understand what his question was. So this has to do with SCI API that's generated for ACL rules.
Yeah.
And I can share my screen.
Yeah.
I'll
stop sharing.
Let's see.
Up arrow. I don't know if you're on a Mac or a PC.
Okay, I'm looking for the sharing. Why can't I find this now?
It's a little white box with a black up arrow in it, at least on my desktop.
Yeah, next to the red button.
Next to the red button.
Oh yeah, I see it. Hey, it says share. How about that?
Yeah, how about
Why is this software so complicated?
I can't find the mute button still, so yeah.
Okay, so this is the SCI experimental -acl.h generated file. Now, this is from a workspace that's a couple of weeks old, so hopefully this hasn't changed. But this is what the question was regarding. So the attributes for the rule, you can specify the different things you can match on in the packet, like the source port, desk port, protocol, SIP, and DIP. It was our understanding that the IP addresses that you can match on, the matching rules are actually IP prefixes, not IP addresses. So we were expecting to see like a prefix length being able to be specified here as well.
It's not only one IP, it's a list of IPs. By the way, I think the API generated here is done with P4 code without dash match defined. If you look at the ACL file, there is if-def dash match, which switches from single values that are supported in default BMV2 to lists, which is not supported in default BMV2, which we need to add support to as well. But yeah, it should be in this single representation, it should be prefix, and SCI has a special type for it, SCI IP prefix T. And in the version that is actually kind of the official version of Dash APIs, it's a list of prefixes instead of list of IP addresses.
Okay.
So that's what I'm changing.
Okay, great. Great, thanks.
So in the official version, it's a list of prefixes, you said?
I believe you did, yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I'm just trying to write it down so I'll remember. Okay, great. And so that's all I really had for today, unless you guys have something else. Oh, and Marian, I also added a work item to, I didn't know where to put it exactly, but in the behavioral model project for the virtualized ReDis SyncD whole conversation we had yesterday around side challenger. I can move it around, but I did add it for tracking, so just so we remembered it. And that's all I have for today. Anyone else have anything? Nope. Looks like I can give back 11 minutes. So I will stop the recording.